where we would, I don't know where we would be without you, obviously. It's wonderful to see you here today, and we hope you have a great day. I realize we live at a time that not everybody had good mothers, but if you had one, you want to be thankful. Get your Bible out and let's say this together, okay? This is my Bible. It contains God's will for my life. I can become what it says I can become. Today, I will study from His Word. My mind is alert. My heart is receptive. I'll never again be the same. The book of Ruth opens with some fairly clear time frame of when the events that is written about in her book, in the book, occurred. Most historical books in the Old Testament and even the New Testament revolve around kings and rulers and judges and high priests. This is an interesting story because it talks about the ordinary common people. This is what you find in the person, the people that were living the everyday life at that time. I find it interesting that the account starts in the small village of Bethlehem. A man named Elimelech, Naomi, and Mahlon and Chilion. Acts says this about this particular time. God, endured their conduct for about 40 years in the desert, and He overthrew 7 nations in Canaan and gave their land to His people as their inheritance. All of this time took about 450 years. So the time the children of Israel come out of bondage to this time is about 450 years has passed. The story begins in the period of the Judges when there was a famine. Does it seem strange to you that these people should be experiencing a famine? Stay with me. It's during this time of the Judges that you find that the people are obeying God, they're disobeying God. They'll obey for a few years, they'll come a judge, maybe 20 years, maybe 40 years, and they'll revert right back to what they were doing before. Here's the promise of the blessing given in Deuteronomy long before the children of Israel went into the promised land. If you fully obey the Lord your God and carefully follow all His commands I give you today, the Lord your God will set you high above the nations on the earth. All these blessings will come upon you and accompany you if you obey the Lord your God. You'll be blessed in the city, you'll be blessed in the country. The fruit of your womb will be blessed. The crops of your land and the young of your livestock. The calves of your herds and the lambs of your flocks. Your baskets and your kneading trough will be blessed. You will be blessed when you come in and blessed when you go out. The Lord will grant you that the enemies who rise up against you will be defeated before you. They will come at you from one direction, but flee in 7. The promise of the curse. However, if you do not obey the Lord your God and do not carefully follow all His commands and decrees I'm giving you today, all of these curses will come upon you and overtake you. You'll be cursed in the city and cursed in the country. Your basket and your kneading trough will be cursed. The fruit of your womb will be cursed. The crops of your land and the calves of your herd and the lambs of your flock. You'll also be cursed when you come in and cursed when you go out. Why does Israel find itself in this problem? Because they did not follow. The psalm here summarizes it. You did not destroy the people as the Lord God had commanded you. If they ignore God, the evil that was promised would come. If you read the story and then you go back and read in the Judges, it's almost as if the people, I don't know if they didn't care or they don't take it seriously. Because you go through Moses and then Joshua and Caleb, and when they die, Immediately, it's like they make a mad dash for all the idolatry that they could find. Deuteronomy 20, however, in the cities of the nations the Lord your God is giving you as an inheritance, do not leave anything alive that breathes. Completely destroy them, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Canaanites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites, as the Lord your God has commanded you. Why does he want this? Is a God interested in genocide? Otherwise, they will teach you to follow the detestable things and to do in worshiping their gods, and you will sin against the Lord your God. What was the first commandment? Love the Lord your God first. So God clearly sees the future. He's never surprised. Judges chapter 2, verse 20, therefore the Lord was very angry with Israel and said, because this nation has violated the covenant I laid down for their forefathers and has not listened to me. God had a covenant. He was obligated as long as the people followed him. I will no longer drive out before them any of the nations. Joshua left, but he died. I will use them to test Israel and see whether or not they will keep the way of the Lord and walk in it as their forefathers did. I want to back up here. They left the nations. We often refer to we're in a battle. Our battle is a spiritual battle. Our battle isn't against people. Ephesians 6 says our battle is a spiritual battle in heavenly realms. But I want you to think about it. If Joshua was getting old and Caleb was getting old and they taught the fathers, should not that father have come home wiping blood on an old rag and saying to his son, giving it to his son and saying, if I don't live long enough to finish it, will you finish this task? The Lord had allowed those nations to remain. He did not drive them out because it was God that was driving them out, not the Israelites. By giving him in the hands of Joshua, these are the nations the Lord left to test all those Israelites who had not experienced any of the wars in Canaan. He did this only to teach warfare to the descendants of the Israelites who had not had previous battle experience. Can it really happen? Can it really be that people can go so far as they forgot how to fight? They forgot how to battle? Here's what he left. The 5 rulers of the Philistines, all the Canaanites, the Sidonians, the Hivites, living in Lebanon mountains from Mount Baal Hermon to Lebo Hamath. They were left to test the Israelites to see whether they would obey the Lord's command, which he had given their forefathers through Moses. The Israelites they're now living among the Canaanites, Hittites, Amorites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites. Here was the problem that God warned against. They took their daughters in marriage and gave their own daughters to their sons and served their gods. The Israelites did evil in the eyes of the Lord. They forgot the Lord their God and served Baals and Ashtoreths. How do you forget a God? How do you forget a God who led you out of Egypt? The primary reason that Israel found it so easy to worship the Baals is it greatly appealed to the flesh. It was very much involved sexual immorality. Engaging with these nations in a period, over any length of time, was wrong, period. They were explicitly disobeying God's command to keep themselves separate and from those who worship idols. The word separate, we use it sanctified. They refused to keep themselves sanctified, separate for God. The second reason to worship Baals that was really appealing is they wanted to be like other nations. In fact, the desire to fit in like other nations becomes so great that they no longer care if they follow God at all. They're not interested in being separated from the world. Numbers 25, when Israel was staying in Shittim, the men began to indulge in sexual immorality. This is the reality of what God was worried about. With Moabite women, who invited them to the sacrifices to their gods. It's like in the Romans. When the Romans were involved, they would go into the temples, they would get drunk, and then they would bring out the prostitutes. The same type of thing is happening here. The people ate and bowed down before these gods. So Israel joined in worshiping the Baal of Peor. The Lord's anger burned against them. The Lord said to Moses, take all the leaders of these people, kill them and expose them in broad daylight before the Lord, so that the Lord's fierce anger may turn away from Israel. So Moses said to Israel's judges, each of you must put to death those of your men who have joined in worshiping the Baal of Peor. Then an Israelite man brought his family, a Midianite woman, right before the eyes of Moses and the whole assembly of God. Can you imagine? They've been told not to do it. We'll find in a moment. They've been told not to even utter the words of the God. But here's her having discussion. He comes in with a Moabite wife. The whole assembly of Israel were weeping at the entrance of the tent of meeting. Then Phinehas, the son of Eleazar, the son of Aaron the priest, saw this, and he left the assembly. He took a spear in his hand, and he followed the Israelite into the tent. He drove the spear through both of them, through the Israelite and the woman's body. Then the plague against the Israelites had stopped, but those who died in the plague, 24,000. They've gone a long way from being consecrated to God, from a God that brought them out of bondage. In fact, if you read the last phrase of the word of Judges, it says there was no king in Israel, and every man did what was right in his own sight. Exodus 23, do not invoke the names of other gods. Do not let them be heard on your lips. God intends for sanctification and separation to be real. The name of the woman who was killed with the Midianite woman was Zimri, son of Zadu, the leader of the Simeonite family. And the name of the Midianite woman who was put to death was Cosbi, daughter of Zur, a tribal chief of the Midianite family. The Lord said to Moses, treat the Midianites as enemies and kill them, because they treated you as enemies when they deceived you in the affair of Peor and their sister Cosbi, the daughter of a Midianite leader, the woman who was killed when the plague came as a result of Peor. If you keep continuing the same path, that's where you're going to go. So notice he said, when they deceived you. What is Satan's greatest tool he's known for is deceit. What is it Israel has failed to do? Amalek and Naomi should never have had to leave Israel. You know, if you look on there, Bethlehem and Moab, they should never have had to go over there at all. Imagine a family, you can put yourself in that setting. Imagine an Israelite family, and they go to the land of Moab where people practice prostitution, polygamy, and the idol of worship, where they actually encourage you to take babies and offer them to the god Moloch. When the Lord your God brings you into the land and you possess the land, drive out before you many nations. The Hittites, Girgashites, Amorites, Canaanites, Perizzites, Hittites, Jebusites, 7 nations larger and stronger than you. And when the Lord your God has delivered them over to you and you have defeated them, you must destroy them totally. Make no treaty with them. Show them no mercy. Now, if you go back and read up earlier, it will say that God went to him and said, go to them and ask. And if they don't give you control, then you kill them. Do not intermarry with them. Do not give your daughters to their sons or take their daughters for your sons. For they will turn your sons away from following me to serve other gods. And the Lord's anger will burn against you and quickly destroy you. This is what you are to do to them. Break down their altars, smash their sacred stones, cut down their Asherah poles, and burn the idols in fire. Asherah poles were basically poles of naked women. For you are people holy to the Lord. Listen closely. The Lord your God has chosen you out of all the peoples on the face of the earth to be his people, his treasured possession. The Lord did not set his affection on you and choose you because you were more numerous than other people, for you the fewest of all peoples. But it's because the Lord loved you and he kept an oath he swore to your forefathers and brought you out with a mighty hand and redeemed you from the land of slavery, from the power of Pharaoh, king of Egypt. Know therefore the Lord your God is God. He is faithful. God is keeping his covenant of 1,000 to 1,000 generations, and to those who love him, who keep his commands. God did not choose Israel because they were the largest nation. God chose Israel because he loved them. The reason Israel's baskets are empty is because they are under God's curse. There's some important lessons that we can take. I wanted to put that history in there. Some important lessons that we can learn and take away from Ruth. There is hope even in the most devastating times in our lives. It had to be a big deal for them to leave Bethlehem and go to Moab. It had to be an amazing time. It's not like they had means to preserve things like we had. When you ran out of grain and you ran out of water, you starved. Even as Naomi's life crumbles around her in Moab, she determines to go back to Bethlehem. She got there and she said, "Don't call me Naomi, call me Mara, because the Lord Almighty has made my life very bitter. I went away full, but the Lord has brought me back empty. Why call me Naomi? The Lord has afflicted me. The mighty has brought misfortune upon me." Sometimes the good suffer with the bad. Ruth laid aside her pain. She's going to go home to her family. She's going to face a new society, a new world, and a new God. Number two, the past is not our final destination when we trust in God. God is not concerned about where you were. He's concerned about where you are and where you're going to. Two widows, no sons. But the bad events that happened in their life does not continue to define them. Regardless of your past, you have a purpose. Do you believe that? Do you believe that you have a purpose with God? It's important. You're part of God's purpose. Well, sometimes our confidence is wavering. God's never does. God's promises are based on him. Look at his history. Number three, doing the best thing often takes a great sacrifice. In fact, I would say doing the best thing or the right thing almost always involves a sacrifice. It's easy to talk about it. It's easy to talk about things when we're in here and make plans, but when we walk out the door and we get into the world and society, then the challenge begins. I'm not convinced as I read the story that Ruth's decision was just a momentary decision. I think that she had become very close to her mother-in-law, Naomi, and she wasn't about to go back. Number four, we're given a small window in what can be seen as the future of Christ's redeeming power. Sometimes in Old Testament passages, one after the other, you get a small window. You just see a little glimpse. For example, throughout the Bible, especially in the book of Ruth, Boaz is spoken of as a type of Christ. They call him a redeemer. He's the redeemer in this case of Ruth. Both Ruth and Naomi called him a kinsman. The Hebrew word refers to one who has the right to redeem. Not everyone has that right, but a kinsman has the right to redeem. Jesus will not only have the right, but he will give his life to redeem us. When Boaz was a kinsman redeemer, while he was, Jesus later came to earth and became our kinsman in the flesh. Jesus, Hebrews said, is not ashamed to call us brothers. He says, I'll declare your name to my brothers in the presence of the congregation. I'll sing your praises. God says, I'm not ashamed of you. Praise be to the Lord, the God of Israel, because he has come and has redeemed his people. That's what Zechariah said when he saw Jesus when they brought him to the temple. He said, praise be to the Lord because he's come. He sees it. Notice it's in the past tense. He has redeemed his people. Jesus hasn't died yet. He will shortly, but in the mind, as he understood God's plan, it was that way. Number 5, God uses unlikely people to fulfill his purposes. I've said this the last 2 or 3 weeks. I don't fully understand this. But you and I are all that God has ever wanted. Ruth was a hurting, outcast widow, grew up in a country, an enemy of Israel, was childless, moved into a foreign land where she knew no one but her mother-in-law. Why would you use this woman? Why would you even care? Struggling with poverty, that was the driving force. If you'd been in Israel at that time, you wouldn't have, in your wildest imagination, guessed that God would choose Ruth bloodline to bring into the world the Redeemer Jesus. 5 women, I'm just going to throw this in real quick. 5 women are mentioned in the genealogy of Jesus. Tamar, Rahab, Ruth, Bathsheba, and Mary. Ruth is the story of loyalty. She's determined to stay with her mother-in-law. It's a story of kindness. It's a story of faith. It's a story of redemption. She and Ruth felt useless and worthless where they were. But when they got back to Israel, God used them for his purpose. Even in the most difficult circumstances, God can use you. Do you believe that? It may not seem like it at the moment. I get it. When I'm all spun around the axle and I can't figure out how I'm going to get loose, then I have to realize in those circumstances, God will bring deliverance and will use me in his purpose. How do you fit into God's eternal purpose? I was going to just read Ruth, and I thought we read it. I wanted to give a little background and got carried away, I admit. But I want you to just read it. It's just very quick. It's a marvelous story. When you get the background of how challenging it was, you see how much faith it took for Naomi and Ruth to follow God. We sing a song of invitation here. It's our custom. If we can serve you in some way, either helping you become a Christian or to get your life right with God, or if you want to talk to us, let us know while we stay.